Hey everyone, Looking Eastward Piper here. Back with another video today. I wanted to update you on what's been going on in my life and why I really haven't been filming as much as I've wanted to. The last time I filmed the video was about a month ago when I visited the Gatlin Burlier, and I wanted to talk about that experience. I was out in East Tennessee celebrating my anniversary with my wife. And since then, a lot of things have happened in my personal life, some really good, some really bad. But that's just how life goes. And, we kind of keep trucking along. But I had some time today after coming back from, I'm originally from New Jersey, I live in Tennessee. My grandmother passed away, and I had to go back up and, go to attend her funeral and burial. And I was only up there for a couple days, but it did definitely throw quite the curveball with my week and everything like that. But of course, family comes first. So today I kind of want to talk about a different topic. As I've mentioned in other videos, pipe smoking is definitely something that I love, but it's not my identity. It's not like, oh, pipe smoking is my life. And I think that a lot of people that smoke a pipe feel that way. I know that I'm a pretty multi-dimensional person, and a lot of the people that do smoke pipes are the same way. They're not just interested in that. It's something that they do enjoy to do, usually along with other activities or socializing. And it's not just something that is just a complete hobby that takes over your whole life. So with that being said, I want to talk about something different today. And in the spirit of that, I'm actually going to be smoking a cigar today instead of smoking a pipe, because I also really enjoy smoking cigars. Yes, the channel is called Looking Eastward Piper, and I do probably prefer to smoke a pipe over a cigar, but I also do love a good cigar. And I've really been into sweet tip cigars. Particularly, I really like Baccarat. But I was up in New Jersey, and I went to a cigar lounge with my dad and my brother, and I was looking for something similar because they didn't have that, and they recommended to me this Sarzedas, and it's a pretty similar. I had one of these, and I thoroughly enjoyed them the other night. It's what I like about these is that just the tip is sweetened. It's not the whole cigar. It's not like the Drew acid or something like that the whole cigar is sweet. It gives you a little bit of a sweetness on the tip, but also the natural tobacco comes through. It's like smoking an English that has some Cavendish in it, instead of smoking like a full-blown like a topical aromatic that has like cherry flavoring or something like that. So I really enjoy these kinds of cigars. So I'm going to get this cut and lit, and then we're going to go into today's topic. Today's topic, I want to discuss writing and reading, and as this relates to me in my current state of life right now. So I am in the process of getting a book published and released. Over the last 6 to 8 months, I worked on a manuscript for a book, and it is hopefully by the end of this year should be fully edited and then ready to be pressed and released. And I'll have more details about the book as things progress. And this is a pretty big deal for me because I've always loved to read and write, but I never thought that I would be published. I do run a Substack. I know the topic is probably not for everybody because it has to do, it's faith-based. I am a Byzantine Catholic. I am in communion with the Ruthenian Greek Catholic Church. We are a smaller church that's in communion with the wider Catholic Church, with our patriarch being the Pope of Rome. And our traditions are pretty much the same as our Eastern Orthodox brethren. But instead of being in communion with the Patriarch of Constantinople or the Patriarch of Moscow, we are in communion with the Pope of Rome. And I write mostly about the liturgy, which are the services of both the Catholic and the Orthodox Church, and the Western tradition, and what we call Mass, and in the Eastern liturgy, Eastern tradition, we call the Divine Liturgy. And my newest book is kind of just a brief reflection of the liturgy and things related to that topic. But it had me thinking as I wrote this book, and also as I've kind of seen and observed the world around me, in the current time, that I think reading and writing is something that definitely needs to be not only preserved, but should be definitely stressed, particularly to the younger generation. Now, I'm not what you would call somebody that is an old person. I'm an adult now. I'm almost in my mid-30s. But the generations behind me, so I am, what is called, the millennial. So, I was born in the early 90s, and we were pretty much, I think, the last generation. We were on the cusp of analog and digital, basically. So most of us got to, especially the younger millennials, got to kind of experience the old-fashioned, go play outside, do things that are not just technology driven. It really wasn't until like my later middle school years and into high school where technology started really coming into the bigger play, but it still did not interfere with our lives as much as the current generation. And of course, we could attribute a lot of that to the events that happened between 2020 and 2022, the pandemic that happened. I think that definitely had an effect. I was in education prior to those events. I actually got out just in time the year before. And even then, before that, I observed that there was definitely a big difference between when my generation was coming up in middle school and what was there at the present time. And reading and writing skills were not strong. Even as somebody that did not teach a core subject, I was a music major, and I taught music to middle schoolers. I still had them engage in some light reading and writing, and just from what I saw from that, particularly from the older kids, it was pretty troubling to me. And that's not to put them down or anything, as I really don't think that they are directly to blame. I think it's just, and I can't really necessarily say that the parents are to blame. Maybe they are, but I think it's just how we as a society have drifted. And it is very concerning as somebody who has always loved to read and write, but reading and writing is not just necessarily a hobby or even a talent. It's something that the general populace, especially, nowadays, they should know, because there's really no way of getting around it. But it seems that a lot of our younger generation, our Gen Z and our Gen Alpha, they're having a really tough time, full on academically, yes, but even more so with their oral and written skills. They're very deficient. And I've watched several not influencers, I shouldn't call them influencers. I would say more intellectual content creators, let's call them, here on YouTube, that have talked about this topic. And I've also observed it just being out in the world. And I noticed that kids, particularly that are enrolled in standard public education, they're really behind. And I actually taught in a parochial institution, and they were still even behind as well. So I really think it's more of a generational problem, and a lot of it is that we have moved so far away from analog and everything is digital. And, I'm not going to be here preaching against things like AI. I think that AI and things like that, and technology, if, put into compartments, they can serve a good purpose. I'm not going to be all doomsday about it, but at the same time, the over dependency on it is destroying the intellect of many people. And I've even have heard people say that there's studies out there that basically you're saying people that are heavily reliant on this advanced technology, it's actually reducing their brain function, because all they have to do is, and they don't even have to type it out anymore, because now with talk to text, you could just say, go on GTP or even Google and just say, ask whatever, and it just spits out an answer. And, sometimes we all rely on things like that. But then if we're taking that into the academic world and we're having it compose research papers, and essays, and even figuring out, equations for mathematics and things like that, we're just letting them do it for us. And particularly with reading and writing, it's really evident, because you can see that you have high schoolers now that are at a 4th or 5th grade level with their reading and writing skills, and maybe even lower. So it is something that I think it needs to be preserved and stressed, because we can't let ourselves totally deteriorate. And I know that a lot of people will be very kind of more doomsday about it, and I don't really like that approach, because I feel like when discussing topics like this, there has to be a middle road or a middle ground. We can't necessarily just be all doom and gloom, but it is very concerning. And even people that don't like to necessarily read or write, they should still know how to do it, at least at a somewhat proficient level. We're not talking about a lofty language and studying Old English and getting into other languages like Greek and Latin and things like that. Just that you can communicate and sound like you are at least professional in what you're doing. People don't necessarily need to have degrees to do this. I'm a proponent. Yes, I'm a college grad, but I really think that colleges are starting to become more and more of a waste of somebody's valuable time. Unless you're going to be going into academia, I really see no reason for people pursuing, especially PhDs, because your topic is so narrow and so niche. You're the only person that specializes in that topic. And people are having trouble, finding work that way. But I think the spirit of reading and writing is something that it supports the creative motif in the mind. It's something that supports the imagination, especially in younger people, and can help propel them. In today's world, and especially here in the United States, I think that we're starting to see more and more people thinking outside of the box with ways to make a living, because the standard, nuclear way that things have been since the post-World War II era they're starting to fail. And we can't just keep trying to, either force a previous way of living because we're in a modern time, but we also can't totally throw away our value system and everything because of the machine. So I think, again, there always needs to be a middle way, common ground, and a middle road. But as somebody who, believes in, I am somebody that does believe in God, I think that there are things that need to be maintained through the continuity of history, but there's also things that we need to kind of adapt to, but not at the cost of our humanity. And I think that these skills of reading and writing really help support the person in having an imagination, looking outside the box. And I feel like for me, it's really helped me to kind of see the world in a different way, and to be like, you know what, like, I can't do the same thing forever. I worked the regular, career job for a long time, and I still, in a certain capacity, do that, but while also pursuing other endeavors. And like writing and also some other entrepreneurial things I've mentioned on here, that I am, in the process of starting a family business and things like that, because the regular, the way that things were when I was coming up, like, oh, you got to go to college, you have to get the degree, you have to, get the high paying, 9 to 5 plus desk job where you're just grinding away for a company, but you're not seeing any of that return for yourself. Yes, you're getting compensated, but the time that you're putting in versus what you're getting compensated are not equal. So I think that creativity is something that needs to still be stressed, even with the technology. We can't have AI writing our, stuff. Like, I did not use AI at all to write my book. I actually purposely wrote my book, not even in Microsoft Word. I had to transfer it to there to send it to the publisher, but I did not use it because I did not want Copilot changing my language. And I purposely wrote in a program by Big Huge Labs. It's basically a word processor that is just a little bit more advanced than a typewriter. Basically, you could even make it sound like the typewriter. And that's how I wrote my book, because I did not want these external forces trying to tell me how to write my book. And I think that, the same thing with music, art, we can't totally let technology replace that. But circling back to reading and writing, these are necessary skills for people to have. These days, I guess you can get by without them, but what kind of person on the interior are you really going to be if you can't communicate either orally or by writing or by processing through reading something? So, this is definitely something to think about. And with writing a book, it's definitely made me realize how important it is for us to support people that are actually still doing analog creation without the influence of, obviously, yes, I used a computer to write my book, but I did not let it influence what I was writing. It would just be like me using a pen and paper, transmitting my own words. So again, the technology can support you, but when you start letting the artificial intelligence part of the technology to replace your work, your mind, your own intellect, that is where it becomes very problematic. And we see that now with the youth, particularly here in the United States. As it is, other countries in, East Asia and, definitely, Scandinavia and parts of Europe, they're light years ahead of us with education. And there's a lot of smart people here in the United States. I'm not saying that we're all stupid. I think actually there's a lot more smarter people than we think there are, even if they're not educated in the traditional sense. But there's also a lot of people that are not, and they're using this technology as they're relying totally on it instead of just letting it help them get to the next level. So this is definitely something to keep in mind as we move forward as a society and we move forward as a people, and particularly people in our community, the YPTC, and even the cigar enthusiasts out there and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of these people, because the pipe and the cigar, these are very analog things. We have, like I said, we have the accessories, we have the tampers, the lighters, the cutters, the ashtrays, and technology. The only technology that's helping us get to what we need is a lighter. And actually, most of the time, this is, because of a cigar, I use a torch, but actually, even most of the time when I smoke cigars, I use a match. So you can't get any more analog than a match, unless you're like starting a fire caveman style. Like, that's really the only, less analog way of doing that. So being analog is good, and we could use technology and still remain analog and not totally digital. So, I know that this was a longer video and I went into, this topic on several different angles, but I think it's definitely something worth talking about, and going through this experience of actually writing something more than like a couple thousand word essays and actually writing something a little bit bigger, at more like a little bit over 10,000 words, and it actually getting published into a short actual, published book. This really makes me think about that even more so now. So that's pretty much it for today. I want to thank you all for your continued support. We're over 100 subs. Probably would be at more subs, but I just have not had the time to post. And, just definitely comment below, keep the discussion going, share the video. And that's pretty much it today. So I hope to be back on here soon. And with that being said, Looking Eastward Piper, signing off.